It's a story that has everyone shaking their heads. How is it possible that a family of 6 could have lived in unspeakable squalor in rooms filled with feces, animal carcasses, and the remains of 3 infants? Those are the questions facing authorities today in Blackstone, where cleanup continues at the home where 4 children were taken into state custody, and the mother, Erica Murray, remains in prison pending a mental evaluation. Cleaning crews were back at this house on St. Paul Street in Blackstone today, clearing out waste and debris and disinfecting areas where the bodies of 3 infants and several animals were left to rot.
As of today, the second 20-yard dumpster has been removed and the third one has been dropped off. Reading
from a statement, Town Administrator Dan Keyes said crews have finished clearing the second floor of the home and are working on the first floor. They expect to fill 21 biocontainers. And while they have not gone through the basement yet, inspectors say they don't expect to find hazardous waste there. Meanwhile, Code Enforcement Officer William Walsh addressed what would happen to the house next.
The first thing we would have to do is decontaminate the home, whether we were going to raise it or not. That question will come up in the next week or 2.
The discovery began August 28th, when one of the older of 4 children living in the house contacted a neighbor, asking how to get a baby to stop crying. When the neighbor went to the house, she was shocked, finding a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old upstairs in the home, living in unimaginable squalor. The neighbor called police and the children were removed.
Thank God for that neighbor, who really told her side of the story.
2 weeks later, armed with a search warrant, law enforcement returned. That was when they discovered the bodies of 2 infants last Wednesday and a 3rd on Thursday. Last night, town residents held a vigil, releasing candlelit lanterns. And while everyone is wondering how it was possible this could happen and no one knew anything, one reason was simple. No one ever complained, except about construction debris in the front yard. So what other charges are likely to be filed in this case? I'm joined now by attorney Wendy Murphy, who is a former prosecutor and a victims' rights advocate. Welcome. Wendy, first, just a couple on the legal things. I think people were puzzled why it took 2 weeks after they took the children. They knew there were horrific smells inside that house. Why would it take 2 weeks to get a search warrant?
I don't know, and I can't even speculate. All I can say is there must have been a lot they wanted to put into the search warrant so that they could look as far as they could, basement, upstairs, downstairs, into computers. Because you get a search warrant for a house, you don't necessarily have permission to search computers, and sometimes you have to put a lot of stuff together to get permission from the court to go. Plus, maybe they needed to really analyze what they were facing in terms of the hazardous materials. I mean, that is so unusual. But 2 weeks?
That's a long time.
I don't understand.
Because the other thing is, they picked up the boyfriend, husband, the father of several of the children. He was smoking. They found marijuana in the basement. Apparently, this guy spent a lot of time in the basement to get away from everything that was going on inside the house, which I can understand. Why wouldn't he be charged with something more?
That's my first question. I mean, the delay is extraordinary, and I think we are all waiting for an answer. Because we don't have an answer to that yet, and it's critical. Why would you ever wait 1 second? God knows what could have been there. But secondly, why wasn't the father at least put out there as an equally bad guy? Whether or not you have charges, she was the first and only person shamed and then charged. And whether he was living in the basement or not, I mean, was there a toilet down there?
I don't know.
Obviously, this is something he had some control over because she was giving birth, which means he was having sex with her.
Right.
So that, to me, is an even more important question. Is it just the mother, always the mother's fault when this stuff happens? If she has mental health issues, I would charge him more harshly, not her first and with the primary crimes. The fact that he's charged right now with marijuana possession or something, it's so insulting to me as in terms of who's responsible and what the messaging is thus far.
So the bigger issue, which is, and the neighbors are all asking themselves this: how come we didn't know? How could this be? They did smell stuff going by the house. They didn't know that there was an odor there, but how could no one know? The older children had to go to school. Didn't their clothes smell? Were they laundered? I mean, how could no one know that the woman had 2 other children?
Yeah, and one of the witnesses said that one of the kids was always wearing the same red shirt, or at least a red shirt, which would lead you to wonder, is there any laundry going on? I think we are so reluctant to butt into other people's lives, and we're so nervous about offending them, and what are the consequences? Am I going to have to testify? I don't want anybody looking at my business, so I don't want to be looking at their business. There's just so much about the psychology of why we leave people alone, even in horrible conditions. And then we think that when it's in a family, it's not the public's business anyway. I mean, look how many cases of domestic violence and rape behind closed doors that even when they're reported to police or DCF, they don't get prosecuted because there's this sense still that it's not really the public's business. I'm very frustrated because I've been in this business for a long time, and that way back when we were saying, let's butt in, see something, say something, make that call, you know. It's our job to protect children in particular, whether the parents like us or not. Better to be a bad neighbor from the perspective of the bad parents than let a kid suffer.
Yeah, there's just an assumption here that she has mental health issues. I mean, something is amiss, clearly. But she also told, through her lawyer anyway, that she was fearful to let the boyfriend know that she had other children because he didn't want any more. Is that what happened with the dead fetuses? Did she give birth and did she kill them? Were they alive? I mean, will there be further charges if it turns out they had breathed?
It's hard to prove that the child breathed before dying, but depends on how quickly you do the tests and what the lungs are like. For the most part, you can do it.
Well, I'm assuming these were babies that were nothing but skeletons.
Right. So it depends on the age of and the decomposition. But the fact that there was a placenta attached indicates to me that this was intended to just be disposed of, obviously, from the minute it was born. But I don't care, you know, what he says about I was living in the basement. When you're pregnant and you give birth to a baby that's born at the time it's supposed to be born, even if it then dies right away, you saw that pregnant woman's belly. You knew she was pregnant, and you are equally responsible. We can't just criminalize her because it was her body that produced the baby at the time of birth, because he's equally legally responsible.
There's a lot of ignorance in this world, and people, I knew a girl in high school who had a baby. Her parents didn't know. You know, they hide it in all different kinds of ways, so it's possible.
Look,
I know.
If he'd been in the basement, he smelled what everybody else smelled when they went in. You can't not smell something like a decomposed body. It's a smell you will never forget if you smell it once. And it's so putrid, it's worse than a skunk. You know how bad a skunk is when it's fresh? It's way past skunk. If he lived anywhere near that house, inside, if he was in the basement, the attic, he knew, and he did nothing.
I'm with you, Wendy. All right, Wendy Murphy, great to have you as always.
My pleasure.